Good afternoon, and thanks to all of you for joining us today for our new Vibe Cincinnati Be Empowered Speaker Series. I'm Julie Calvert, President and CEO of the Cincinnati USA Convention and Visitors Bureau. The first ever Black Travel Report from MMGY Travel Intelligence was conducted to better identify the needs, the behaviors, and sentiment of underrepresented travel communities. It was the most extensive travel research study conducted of the Black traveling community. Our team at the Cincinnati USA CVB is focused on preparing the Cincinnati region for years to come by better understanding the future traveler so that we can continue to be a community that is attractive and welcoming to all. With today's panel, we provide this virtual forum to hear about the research, and we also have assembled experts from our industry to share perspectives to help our region collectively meet those goals. I want to first thank Jason Dunn, our CVB's Group Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, for assembling this opportunity for meaningful conversations like the one we'll have this afternoon. Moderating today's session is WCPO Senior Reporter Larry Seward. Larry is a Cincinnati native who moved his family back home last year after nearly a decade covering news in Houston. Larry's career began as a photographer in the Florence Myrtle Beach, South Carolina market, where he ran live trucks, and after earning a reporting role, performed his own live shots. While in college, he was the assistant sports director for WOUB TV and radio and was part of a team of students that won an Emmy Award in 2003 for a high school football show called Gridiron Glory. He graduated magna cum laude from Ohio University's E.W. Scripps School of Journalism in 2002. Again, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your perspectives. With that, let's get started. Larry?
Julie, thank you for that wonderful introduction and welcome everybody. This is going to be fun and enlightening and I can't wait to get started. I have to introduce you to the man who's going to bring us some fascinating research and sort of kick off our forum today. Danny Guerrero, as Julie talked about MMGY Global, Danny is their Vice President of North American Strategy. He has 20 years of experience in the travel, hospitality, and tourism industries. He's led strategy campaigns for luxury hotels throughout the Americas. His past also includes work with Tourism Australia, Visit California, Fiji Airways, and Turismo Chile. Danny, welcome, and please enlighten us with this research you have.
Thank you for that great intro. Hello, everybody. Great to see you all today. I'm going to be sharing my screen and getting into our presentation. This obviously is an honor for me to be here today, given Jason Dunn's pivotal involvement in this study. This study is the first of many that our agency, MMGY Global and MMGY Travel Intelligence, will undertake on behalf of the travel and tourism industry. After the tragic events of George Floyd in 2020, and even beforehand, we were talking to the BTA about continuing to advocate for underrepresented travelers in the way that we deploy our research. Our MMGY Travel Intelligence division is now over 40 years old. And for that time, we actually had not broken out the data as such. So it's a really important initiative that began with this important study. A little bit about the study, we really wanted to be comprehensive in our approach. You'll meet our partners in this event, including the Black Travel Alliance, who really pushed for a deep understanding of quantifying the true value of the Black travel market. And so the study was deployed in two different phases. A first phase issued in November of 2020 sought to understand the domestic 2019 spend of the Black travel community in the US, and then also through the participation and collaboration of the National Coalition of Black Meeting Professionals, we were able to deploy a custom study of Black meeting professionals in the US, which you'll see today. The second phase of the study was released in January of this year and aggregated not only the US domestic spend, but the international spend of the Black traveler, as we did deploy the study in international markets, including Canada, UK and Ireland, Germany, and France. So in aggregate, a really good snapshot into what the Black travel community is contributing to the global tourism economy. I want to obviously thank the partners, and this study really has been developed through a series of partnerships and an inclusive approach to gleaning insights. Today on the conversation, we'll have my colleague, Ursula Patula Barzi, who's a board member, research committee chair with the BTA, who was instrumental in putting together the leisure study. Mr. Jason Dunn. It's an honor to be on this presentation today. In his role as immediate past chairman of the NCBMP, was instrumental in ensuring that we had a large enough sample size from the Black media professional community. And then Mr. Steve Paganelli, also very influential in that TripAdvisor was one of the sponsors who held up the study, sponsored the study, and also contributed to the development of the research. And Steve will be with us today as well. A little bit about our partner organizations. One of the things we were intentional on as we deployed our work at MMGY was to include underrepresented voices and communities. And there probably is no greater organization in the Black travel advocacy space than the Black Travel Alliance. They work tirelessly to advocate for the Black travel community and Black content creators. They had an amazing campaign that I'll let Ursula talk about later on in the presentation that really held destinations and travel brands accountable after so many were posting those black squares after the tragic death of George Floyd. Another very important organization, as well as the NCBMP, who've been around many years, since I believe 1985, advocating for the Black media professional community. And in this presentation today, I'll be able to share some really insightful and a bit disheartening insights shared by members of this group. The other component to this is that the study was also put together through an inclusive process of a steering committee, really gathering perspectives from across the industry and across organizations to inform the study. One of the things I want to make note of is following the launch of the report and the sales of the report, we have raised over $100,000 for contributions back to the organizations, NCBMP, Black Travel Alliance, and NABHOOD, but as well as launched this amazing grant program. So for any businesses out there, Black-owned businesses or Black content creators, we urge you to please apply at mmgyglobal.com. This is a key part of our give back effort in regards to the study. So without further ado, I want to go over the phase one, which I talked about earlier. One of the many impressive facts here is that there is a total in 2019, which is the last normal travel year, of 458 million leisure stays by the Black travel community. That's accounting for over 13% of all US travel. And it's important to note here that the way we measure this is, for example, if this couple on screen was going to 3 destinations, we classify that as a 6-night stay. So in an effort to really aggregate the volume and quantify the volume, this data point was really important in representing how the Black travel community forms a larger US travel activity. From a demographic standpoint, we found that the US Black leisure travelers are similar to all US leisure travelers in age, employment status, and presence of children. We did note that median income was less and less likely to be married. In spite of that, one of the first key points that we must note is that in spite of a lower median income, when you look at total US Black leisure travel, let's say in 2019, 2017, 2016, and somewhat in 2018 flat, is that Black leisure travelers are prioritizing number of trips, so that in essence, the median income being less doesn't really affect how active they are in taking trips. And that's really important for marketers like our agency to understand that sometimes median household income is not an indicator of whether or not any certain community will travel. And I think that's a really important point. Looking at the data, we're also seeing that a large percentage, 35% for overnight leisure stays are visiting friends and relatives, but also obviously others are prioritizing weekend getaways and general vacation. As we go into the study, we'll talk more about the importance of feeling safe and feeling welcome. And certainly when visiting friends and relatives or going to destinations where Black travelers feel welcomed, those are kind of obviously less barriers are present for travelers when they feel like they have somebody who they know in that destination or have experiences they know. Another great insight is that over 80% of Black travelers are traveling alone or in pairs. So unlike other communities and other segments, you see a lot of really empowerment of Black travelers wanting to go out there and explore. And in a few slides, we'll talk about some of the motivators and the activities that they're undertaking during these trips. For the purposes of phase one, 94% of the overnight leisure market we're studying is domestic in nature. Certainly a lot of opportunities for Cincinnati in the domestic market. And we're also finding in 2019 that 85% of all Black leisure traveler stays happen by car, with an average of 240 miles roughly driven in each direction. Not to say that airplane travel did not register, but as we look at opportunities for hospitality, businesses, travel experiences, that the drive market certainly seems to be an opportunity, and I would think especially for Cincinnati. One of the points I made earlier was in regards to where Black travelers are going or what the characteristics are of visiting friends and relatives. Certainly this dispersal in terms of where they're going in the US is largely focused on the South, with Florida, the mid-Atlantic states, and Texas. There is an interesting opportunity for destinations, obviously, who want to be more embracing of the Black travel community, in terms of some of the things that we'll see in this presentation regarding, again, the idea of feeling welcome, or the idea of seeing themselves in advertising, or the idea of just fostering destinations and experiences that are welcoming of Black travelers. There's a lot of work being done in the space right now to ensure that's the case. And certainly as we see these numbers, I would say anybody who's not shaded in has a tremendous opportunity to increase the appeal of their destination over time. Because in reality, one of the things that we're seeing both in the Black media professional study, the phase 2 study I'll show later, and this current study, is that safety is a concern. That when you compare the Black leisure respondent against the total US leisure, you're seeing that Black leisure travelers are largely feeling less safe than the general population. You see this in 2019, it's flat for 2018. It's lower for 2017 and even lower for 2016. I imagine in 2020, this fact plummeted even more, given all the injustices, in our country regarding the treatment of Black men and women. So important to note that feeling safe is an area where I think travel brands and destinations need to really plus up. And that's a little bit of snapshot of the 2019 domestic snapshot. Going into the Black meeting professionals research now, there's about 7.5 average number of meetings planned per year, with 914,000 spent on average on meetings. You see that at least 18% of those total meetings are more than 1 million, meaning that the market opportunity here for working with Black meeting professionals is sizable. About 122,000 is being spent on average per meeting. And when you look at where Black meeting professionals are holding meetings, you'll be happy to see Cincinnati positioned very well on the top here. I'd say kudos to obviously Cincinnati, USA, the work Jason has done, and Julie, to really embrace Black meetings and Black meeting professionals. I think that the destinations who are doing it well, obviously are their name is large on this screen. Many destinations who prioritize meetings aren't doing as well. And as we recover in the industry, it will be important that the data shown here is taken into consideration when attracting this segment. For the demographic of these meeting attendees, the majority are between the ages of 31 and 64. The majority of attendees are Black, and then we have a fairly even split between male and female. And why that's important is because it's important to understand who obviously the participants of these meetings are, in that the feedback provided in this study is important not only from the experiences the meeting attendees are having, but also the barriers that the meeting professionals are having themselves, because we see that there is an economic imperative here. 57% of those planners are planning meetings off-site, and on average, there's about $120 being budgeted per person. That's average. Obviously, will be lower and higher depending on the size of the meeting and the length of stay, but certainly beyond the venue, beyond the meeting venue, an opportunity for destinations and businesses within neighborhoods to really take advantage of that. 83% are likely to reach out to CVBs and DMOs for assistance in planning. But the real impressive fact here, and again, we see a correlation about Black meeting professionals or Black travelers going to the people that they know, going to trusted sources to find out where, what locations are conducive to Black meetings. 78% are going to word of mouth versus that 77% for CVBs and DMOs. Influential when selecting a meeting location, 84%, say that the destination's commitment to diversity and inclusion is important. That the diverse racial composition of the destination and local community support are also factoring in. You'll see here, interestingly, that the last, 77%, still significant, is saying representation of Black travelers in the destination's marketing materials will influence the meeting locations. And certainly, in the travel marketing space, we've had a lot of conversations about that, representation in travel marketing materials and marketing materials is the low-hanging fruit. The bigger conversations happening now is around how communities can make sure that the local community is supportive of these diverse groups, and that there's a commitment, a really authentic commitment to diversity and inclusion that goes beyond just marketing and empty words and promises. One of the things that we saw and we asked is participants' challenges they had when planning meetings. Sadly, 67% no to attendee satisfaction, meaning that of the 200 meeting planners that, over 60% mentioned that their attendees aren't satisfied. And why? What are the challenges for Black groups? Poor customer service, 70% talk about poor customer service. And so, when you start kind of pulling back the layers and start questioning in terms of how, how Black meeting professionals and Black meeting attendees are being treated, it's clear that there is some room for improvement there. I'm sorry, my mouse is going crazy. One of the anecdotes that I want to share is that's important is that 84% agree that some destinations are more welcoming of Black groups than others. And this quote is powerful in saying, we do not receive some of the same incentives as other groups. We don't receive red carpet treatment due to lack of understanding of what the group represents and the significance of selecting the city. Black groups must consider if a city or venue is friendly to Black people first before doing business there. And that's certainly the case that we're seeing in this feedback, is that there is a barrier for equal treatment and inclusion, whether it's at the destination level at times, at the venue level. And the opportunity is strong because 90% of planners agree that attendees are likely to return to destinations that they've have a good experience. So it's important that their the totality of their experience when they're on site, whether it's on a venue in a neighborhood or in a convention center or what have you, is important to fostering that repeat business. When we talk about kind of going beyond the surface here, Black media professionals said that 84%, in fact, said that seeing Black hospitality professionals at every level of management plays a role in deciding to bring the meeting to a destination. It's not just about advertising, which we talk about here on the left. It's important to see yourself in the advertising, but how reassuring is it if you show up to a hotel, a convention center, or a DMO and see that there's sufficient Black and brown representation as well at the management level of people who are really tending to your meeting or your conference. That's a little bit of a snapshot on the Black meeting professional. I know that Cincinnati USA has purchased a study and will probably be deploying it in a way that will benefit those of you who want more information. I'll get into phase 2 now. So this is a global Black traveler. This is a large sample size that was deployed in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic, both in the US and the UK, Ireland, France, Germany, and Canada. And so we'll see a little bit of data that compares responses across those different markets. In terms of feeling unwelcome in destinations, we see that certainly the US ranks the highest for consumers who are saying that they have felt unwelcome in destinations they have visited. In my opinion, anything higher than 0 is concerning here. So to see that in the US, 38% of those Black consumers are saying that, that's obviously a concern. When it comes to experiences in hotels and resort, it's a similar stat here, that 37% of Black Americans say that they have felt unwelcome there. Influential in choosing a destination. So travel marketers and travel and tourism marketers have come to a reckoning that you really cannot separate a personal identity from the way that you are perceived or the way that you show up in our society. Increasingly, obviously, after this last year, we've learned so much about the fact that race does play a role. And so I think it's really important for organizations and brands to know that you can't really separate the fact, especially with Black travelers, and we saw some data as well in regards to the feeling of safety, that there are concerns there. So as you know, Black travelers are pegging a lot of their personal experiences, obviously, to how they see themselves when they're out traveling, whether it's, you know, getting on a plane or attending a meeting or just enjoying themselves, you know, at the hotel pool. It doesn't matter. What's influential is that 74% of Americans are saying that it's important that the destination is welcoming of Black travelers. This is a big slide to speak to, and I'm sure we'll get to it later in terms of how that happens. It's again, much more than just putting a Black family on a website or a brochure. It's really has to be well developed in the way that the destination is committed to this, to diversity inclusion. 68% in the US, you know, said, and that's a substantial amount. You know, almost 7 in 10 are saying that it's important for them that the destination is committed to this, committed to diversity and inclusion. Over half said that they're more likely to visit a destination if they see that representation. So again, you know, by now, low-hanging fruit, but it was important for us to ask this question. And similarly for travel services and travel providers. So these are going to be, you know, transportation, airlines, hotels, insurance companies, what have you. You know, almost half are saying that also it's important to see themselves represented in that advertising. And as much as we talk about the needs of Black travelers and the realities, you know, we obviously, travel is something that's inspiring, something that we all look to for relaxation or for exploring somewhere new. And certainly those things come up in our study as we look across the markets, how these things are nuanced. But one of the things that we are seeing with Black consumers in general is just this idea of an empowerment, the idea of being more intentional about going out to experience culture. So if you're a destination like Cincinnati, you're seeing that consumers are out there and they're really interested in doing more and learning more and opening horizons. And I think that's an opportunity for all travel brands right now, as we look at how we build back recovery in travel and how we capture more of this market. In the US, and obviously this now is a few months old, so it will be curious to see how vaccination rates are affecting and hopefully continued positive economic indicators are contributing to the optimism. We're seeing that for Black travelers, there was a slight decrease, 0.4 of a point on intent to travel in 2021. Perhaps our friend Steve at TripAdvisor can give us some more actionable data now on how things are looking into the summer months. A recent survey that we have put forth shows that optimism in travel is at an all-time high even before the pandemic. So I'm hopeful that these numbers will recover as we move along. In terms of intended spend, we're seeing about the Black travelers that we surveyed here in the US looking to spend about $1,300 in travel this year. And similar to my comments before, I think that with the pandemic hopefully abating and confidence resurging, that more of a discretionary income could be available. You know, we know that Black and brown communities have suffered disproportionately from the pandemic and job losses. So what's important now is to make sure that we are creating an environment in travel that is inclusive for everybody. Because why? You know, the economic imperative is there. When we aggregate the entire spend in 2019 of both domestic and international, the Black leisure travel market is a juggernaut at over $129 billion in spend across the US, across the globe. So certainly a priority market for any travel brand and destination that's looking to get back on its feet. In terms of the average spend per trip, so this is a little bit different than the last slide I showed, in which we're asking overall intention. This is per trip, what you plan to spend and where. So if you're in accommodation, if you're a transportation provider, any of these categories, really, you know, the research should help to inform how you are going to be more inclusive and provide that safety assurance that Black travelers are looking for. Average length of stay will be about 4.5 nights, we project. Again, that might change depending on the recovery. And then the average travel party is about 3.2. So again, opportunities to really get to know more about this segment. For Black travelers, we're seeing that nearly 60% are preferring hotels. I think hotels have done a lot in the pandemic to assure certification, cleanliness standards, and even testing. And we're seeing that OTAs are a little bit of outpacing accommodation websites. So we see a lot of movement in the OTAs in regards to their own inclusion initiatives and diversity initiatives, so that they can be, a pathway to better representation in travel. And I mentioned culture. So, Black travelers are increasingly looking at culture. Over 61% talked about interest in just being out, seeing the sites, visiting historic sites, museums, and live music, and even Black history sites. It's certainly something that we've seen shift over time, a 2-point difference actually between 2019 and 2021 in terms of wanting to see more. And, interestingly enough, and maybe not surprising, Black travelers are partying a little bit less family and life events, maybe because we've all been cooped up with our loved ones for the better part of a year. And I think the opportunity is for any destination or brand who is really promoting the idea of embracing Black travelers, of making facilitating experiences that are opening up horizons and opportunities to learn, are going to be successful, as well as just overall fulfillment, whether it's attractions, whether it's nature. We see sports and wellness, all these things are indexing higher, meaning that perhaps there is more interest, perhaps there is more confidence in being out there and experiencing travel more than before. And that's a really good thing to see. In terms of what's influential, we talked about this before, that it's welcoming to Black travelers, that it's perceived safe. Over 70% are saying that, that there's commitment to diversity and inclusion. But even, looking further down this list is talking about the, over half want to see that Black cultural experiences are offered, that there's promotion of Black-owned hospitality businesses, and that there is even an intent or more activity in working with Black content creators. And we'll talk a little bit about that and kind of what the BTA does as well. Because at the end of the day, I think there's obviously a lot of room for improvement that we've talked about in this presentation. Whether it's the safety issue, and again, when Black travelers say that they have to be more aware of their surroundings, that's a concern. But also, how do we embrace Black culture and deal with the fact that, again, race does matter, and that, for example, 53% are saying the Black Lives Matter movement is sorry, UPS delivery. The Black Lives Matter movement matters, in terms of how they're perceiving the travel industry. Quickly, for the international report, over $7.8 billion spent just in Canada. So the Canadian spending both domestically and internationally. That's $9 billion for UK and Ireland. That's $8.1 billion in Germany, and that's $5 billion in France. So in aggregate, these numbers are very important. And I think the Black Travel Alliance certainly is using this. We'll actually be releasing the UK and Europe presentation of this next month, because it is important to advocate on all levels about the importance of these communities. From a media influencer standpoint, 46% are saying that they're more likely to visit a destination that has been covered by a Black journalist, travel writer, or influencer. We're talking about a lot of awareness, not only in culture, but also with awareness of travel groups, people who are advocating for Black travelers, brown travelers. So 48% of those surveyed here in the US are aware of groups like Black Women in Travel, Black Travel Alliance. So these groups are having a ton of events and ways for travel brands to become part of their organizations and leveraging really talented Black content creators to get the word out to consumers. So it's an important thing to note. And of those aware, nearly 60% are actual members. So a lot of activism, a lot of involvement, and I think it's a really great thing to see. I want to quickly plug our next study. I mentioned earlier that it's really our intent to do more to uncover and reveal the importance of underrepresented communities. We're really proud to say we are about to embark and launching our Latinx US Travelers Study, which will talk about this important and growing community here in the US. And so hopefully we can come back to Cincinnati and present a little bit more on that one when it's ready. But for now, it's been an absolute pleasure presenting today, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Danny, thank you. That was a remarkable presentation. And I have plenty of follow-ups I want to drill down with you a little bit. But before we do that, I do need to introduce our panel, our very illustrious panel. I want to say one thing, though. We were going to have the president of the Black Travel Alliance on with us, Martinque Lewis. The good news is Martinque is actually traveling. The bad news is that she's caught up in Mexico with her flight, so she's not able to join us. But we've got a great backup. I hate even saying backup. Ursula, you're a starting pitcher in our lineup here. Ursula Patula Barzi is one of our panelists, and she has over 20 years of experience in sales and marketing. She's currently in London right now. She's the founder of Moxie Marketing. It's a digital marketing agency over across the pond. She is also the founder of a blog, Caribbean & Company, which features the best cultural and food adventures, places to stay, live, and work opportunities in the Caribbean region, which is close to my heart. My wife is from the Caribbean. She will be glad to engage with you at some point. Last summer, though, she became co-founder and board member and research committee chair of the Black Travel Alliance. Ursula, thank you for being a part of our panel. We also have with us this afternoon, Stephen Paganelli. He is from TripAdvisor. He is the director of destination marketing. Now, he oversees connections with 315 monthly users for travel for TripAdvisor, 25 years experience in the travel industry, serves on the German National Tourist Office Advisory Board. He also serves with the Western Association of Convention Visitors Bureau's Foundation Board. Stephen, thank you so much for being a part of this. Cannot wait to hear from you as well. I'm going to wipe my lens. I'm outside. I'm sorry, and it's getting a little foggy. Also a part of our panel this afternoon, Jason Dunn. You've heard his name. He's with the Cincinnati USA Convention and Visitors Bureau. He's the group vice president, as Julie Calvert told us off the top, of equity and inclusion. 2 decades of experience there. A lot of experience on this panel here. So he's been in the national hospitality industry. He is a change maker. He has led efforts to deliver significant new convention business here to the Cincinnati area. He is the chair of the Southwest Ohio Regional Transit Authority, which I should say last year they got a ballot initiative passed. He helped with that invested $1 billion to improve the region's transit system and infrastructure. We know that is important given what we just heard from Danny about the drive market, and as well as improving the infrastructure for transit. So we'll talk more about that here in a bit. All of the panelists, thank you very much for being here. I do want to start, though, with Danny, because you mentioned safety being such an important part of the Black travel experience. Can you drill down a little bit more on some of the safety signals that, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but that are easy for us to go grab and post so that people are more attracted to the Cincinnati region?
Sure, and thank you for that. So one of the things that was important in making the assertion about safety is that we saw that come up not only in phase 1, but phase 2 as well. And it was consistent when you look at what our own data was saying in 2019, what the NCBMP members were saying, and then what the larger global data was saying. Safety, means a variety of things. Obviously, from a larger societal standpoint, we have situations like what we saw, let's say, in New York City, last December, with a young Black gentleman being accosted by a woman in a lobby, and then the hotel taking the side of the woman without asking any questions. Actually, in the research, we're showing that men are actually indexing higher for feeling unsafe than women. So there is obviously larger societal realities that have to be reckoned with. When it comes down to what we can do in travel and tourism, really is a lot about training against systemic racism, unconscious bias, and making sure that every part of the operations that fuel travel and tourism, whether you're a hotel, a transportation company, or anybody in hospitality, that there's that unconscious bias training around the treatment of individuals. And I think that's important, because what we're seeing is that feeling unsafe is not necessarily just overt crime or overt injustices. It is about the treatment. And reason follows that the treatment is not there, that that it opens up a lot of insecurities for travelers when they don't feel like they're going to be protected, whether it's in their hotel or whether it's out on the street. So it's a big conversation, and it not need to be overwhelming, because I think that organizations have the power to implement the training, implement the awareness that I think we need.
Ursula, I want to ask this next question to you. Danny's research made a point to emphasis about being friendly to the Black traveler as a key to choosing a destination. That's what some of those surveys said. What is the difference between what folks in the industry see as friendly to Black and what the expectations are of a Black traveler?
So, I mean, when it comes to, it's actually linked into safety because, one of the things that Black travelers do, before they choose a destination, they ask their friends and family, and they use Google. And the third thing is that they ask online. So they're asking in groups like, Nomadness Tribe, which has over, 20,000 members. They're asking in, the Black Travel Movement, which has, 500,000 users. And so they're asking questions, about safety. They're asking questions about what is going to be my experience if I walk up to X hotel. If I go into X restaurant, what is the experience going to be like? And so, it's crime is one thing, but it's like, is the person at the front desk going to be welcoming? Are they going to, check me in? On time and not, push me to the side. So that is the expectation, is we want the same level of service that other customers get. And oftentimes when you go to a hotel, restaurant, tour experience, it's not the same. And that leads back to the training, the unconscious bias. For whatever reason, it's just like, I'm standing here, please treat me the same way as, other customers. So that's really what's needed. A lot of on-the-ground training by the frontline staff that are, interacting with Black travelers on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for that, Ursula. Steve, this next question is for you. One of the factors, I believe, in the research that Danny mentioned, 84%, at least in the meeting sphere here, say commitment to diversity and inclusion was important. And we talked about trying to go beyond a marketing campaign. I wonder, though, because there are some convention centers that have a diverse staff, but zero people of color in sort of their executive leadership position. How does that impact your ability to connect with the Black traveler that is looking for that commitment?
Yeah, it's a really great point, right? I mean, a meeting planner comes into a community, sits down with leadership of the hotel community, the convention center, and if we're not seeing people that look like us across the table, that instantly sends a signal that maybe we're not quite held on the same plane, or will be welcome. Attendees will be welcomed with this in the same way that other attendees will be. So I think there has to be a focus on placing Black and brown members of the community into positions of leadership at the convention center, but really across the community. Again, if you think about the large conventions that come to Cincinnati, they're using a variety of resources and meeting with a lot of different individuals. And so, we go where we feel comfortable and where we see people who look like us and that align with sort of the personal identities we have. Now that's not something that's solved overnight, but it's something that has to be sort of top of mind and be part of the strategy, frankly, with each new role that opens up within a community. And I think that the Convention and Visitor Bureau has a unique sort of leadership position that they can play frankly, in their own staff hiring as well.
Jason, for you, you did an interview and you talked about the Convention and Visitors Bureau here in Cincinnati, having an office focused on securing diverse and Black conventions. And I know that's a passion of yours. Can you walk us through that process with sort of a detailed and landmarks that you've reached and want to reach with that?
Yeah, so I think it is important to understand context. The department was created post 2001 with our own unrest here in the city. And that discussion came with Dan Lincoln, who was our past president, and many members of the board who are still on the board and some who are gone. And the discussion came about is we have to have a relationship with the local community. And if you look at the way we've gotten a lot of our international conventions, most of them have come because we've had local support. We go to the local communities first, the local chapters or affiliates. Then we go to the state organizations, then on to the regional, and then to the national or international headquarters before we even get permission to get the RFP. It's like we're inviting someone to someone's home without asking them if we don't go through that process. And so a lot of it comes from how do we align those local persons within the international scope or tether them to the ask, and then what does that resource do to come back to our community? So I believe that tourism empowers communities. So I'm keenly aware of the type of organizations that we bring to a destination based off of their mission. Many of our groups are purpose driven. So we look at the purpose of why they were created. We bring the resources here locally by asking the local chapters or affiliates if they can come. And then we try to marry them with local entities, whether it be the African American Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the LGBT community, et cetera. And it's basically what we call the community-based selling model. And that has been successful for us. The department that we had pre-COVID was focused on sales, marketing, and raising money or fundraising for those individual organizations. As you see, it's been profitable for us because we have been positioned as a destination of choice for multicultural conventions, and frankly, have fought above our class weight with beating people like Miami and Washington and Disney, Las Vegas, et cetera, with that approach, understanding why they want to meet, connecting them to an actual a reason, and then fully resourcing them through our department pre-COVID.
Danny, next question for you. It's coming off some of the things that Jason's just mentioning there. And in fact, your research talked about Cincinnati being well positioned right now among cities for Black meeting professionals here. What is it that we have that could potentially carry over into the leisure market?
Absolutely. So I think that a lot of the meeting professional environment obviously is very tight knit, and I do think that through the work, obviously not only on Jason's work with NCPMP, being a member there, you've had a lot of opening up of opportunities, right, on what Black meeting professionals are looking for in their in conference facilities, in hotels, in the way that they're being treated, in the way that they understand. I think a lot of those lessons learned can be applied at a larger destination level in terms of, hey, what are some of the success stories? What is the sharing out of things that we see from a financial impact standpoint, right? How are we able to learn from the things that have gone well and share out that information to other businesses in Cincinnati in terms of treatment, in terms of opening up perhaps neighborhoods or destinations within Cincinnati that haven't necessarily been looked at before, or even just having advocates. The fact that Cincinnati is ranking high, a lot of what the BTA do is produce content out that advocates for positive experiences. We know friends, relatives, and the advice of people is important. So, for example, how could we leverage some of the great reputation Cincinnati's built and put a campaign out, more content creators out to share those experiences and those narratives? And I'm sure Julie and the team and Jason are doing those things, but it's just sharing of information. It's being okay with having these conversations. For the better part of a year now, almost coming on a year actually, the industry was almost paralyzed at first when we were forced to talk about these things. Not forced, we needed to talk about these things. And for a large time there, I would say that, people that are not of color had a challenge speaking about these things, right? Getting comfortable with the uncomfortable was a thing that we heard a lot last summer. And without opening those doors up, we aren't able to talk about the things that are important. Race matters to people. Feeling welcome matters to people. And so I think now for destinations like Cincinnati who have made great inroads, it's about pushing that further. It's about inviting people to conversations like today where they still might not know what right or wrong is, but that the intention is that as a community at large, there will be movement to be more embracing, not only of Black people, but brown people, people with disabilities, people who don't see themselves right in the fabric of whatever it is that we've developed. And Cincinnati is not the only place. Lots of destinations in the U.S. are going through the same thing. So great question. I think it has to be a grassroots initiative in sharing information, sharing ideas.
Ursula, I wonder, when you go about some of the changes that we're talking about here in trying to be more welcoming and to be more friendly to Black travelers, or to travelers with disabilities, et cetera. How do we tap into embracing Black culture and some of the things that people are asking for? I can think of Black Lives Matter, and that became political. How do we do that without becoming political or running into that perception that it hurts business?
Well, I mean, from a tourism, standpoint, I mean, looking at what the, study told us is that culture is one of the top, activities that Black travelers are, interested in. From that standpoint, so it's a question of, developing products that speak to that, experiences that speak to that, whether at the museum, local tour operators, you name it. And then, inviting, folks, who are Black content creators, whether they be journalists, vloggers, photographers, to your destination to experience. Speaking for myself, we tend to ask different questions. And so, it's more authentic, and, we can help with the storytelling, so that we can, position your destination to Black travelers in a way that is meaningful, and not, superficial. It doesn't all have to be, political. It just needs to be authentic. And that's, what you get when you invite, Black, brown, Asian, people to your city, because they can help you tell your story, and speak to an audience that you're trying to attract. So, if you're serious about more, Black travelers, then invite people who look like those Black travelers, to help tell your story.
Jason, you have something you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think everything Ursula is saying is correct. And I think that the department pre-COVID was focused on that when we had, to her point, the Asian community, LGBT community, Black community, Hispanic, et cetera, with the Vibe platform. And again, you have to empower people to speak up and to represent themselves. And you don't know who or what organizations people are part of, because if you're not specifically going after those particular markets, there's no way you have a relationship. So what we were intentional in an authentic way in doing that. And I think that it was a little difficult in the beginning, and then pre-COVID, it was welcomed. And I think the numbers, again, like I said, the data has been shown, and the music festival being one data point, the Moon Festival, many people know I'm talking about who are from Cincinnati, is one data point as well, that we were intentional. And we've earned business from that by saying we want you to be a part of the process. We're talking to you directly. We're marketing to you. We're speaking to you, and it's an authentic voice. And I think that we have to be careful not to, or people have to resist the temptation of going back to being comfortable, and allowing the progression of widening of the conversation to continue, and not be threatened by other organizations, other sectors, other markets, other conventions or tourism being a part of the conversation moving forward. The demographics are changing. So old ways are not going to speak to the markets that are, frankly, the new consumer base.
Steve, if you have any thoughts about that, I'll let you share here, but I also have a follow-up question for you if you don't.
Yeah, no, I do actually. I mean, I think, you started by asking what are the lessons that Jason has applied on the meetings and convention side that apply to the leisure traveler. And I think it is exactly what he was sort of just alluding to, which is starting with the community first. There are, rich stories of Cincinnati's own residents from within the diverse communities that Cincinnati is trying to attract as visitors, be that Black travelers, be that Asian American travelers, or LGBTQ travelers. And so tapping into the community to help tell the destination story, to Jason's point, I mean, that is the level of authenticity that I think travelers are seeking. And then supplement that with sort of the outside voices that Ursula talks about. That's the way to really build a robust strategy for attracting a wider audience of visitors for Cincinnati. So, I mean, I think so many of the great foundational pieces are in place with Cincinnati to sort of build off of in that regard.
Question I want to ask you though, Steve, is, hearing that for the Black traveler, the drive market is more than 80%. For businesses here, what opportunities should we be looking at specifically within that realm that could really boom?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is where sort of data comes into play. Understanding what are the markets that are driving visitation, geographic markets that are driving visitation to Cincinnati, and really looking to see, are there holes within those markets that fall within that drive distance? And then through very focused tactical efforts, reaching out to those communities, either to bring in more travelers from those feeder markets, or again, plugging the holes where maybe there's markets that represent great potential for the destination that for one reason or another aren't coming to Cincinnati. And the great news is that for destinations, there's a lot more data resources available to understand those sorts of things and make those informed decisions about who to target, when to target them. That's ultimately going to drive the visitation.
I'll pause here for a second so that those that are listening, if you have questions, I believe you have the ability to put those in the chat box. And if you do, if those pop up, I will ask our panelists your questions. But that report that Danny presented, I have 1,000,001 questions that I can't ask all in this space. And so, but I do wonder though, for each one of you, and I want to start with Danny, then I go to Ursula, Steve, and then Jason. I wonder how this report fires up your passion.
I don't know if I can muster any more passion. But this report signifies the very necessary conversations that we've been having now since November, and important to Cincinnati, important to communities that rely on travel and tourism, important to the industry at large. We have been fortunate enough now, Jason's been part, and Ursula and Steve too, presentations to a myriad of organizations in the US, a myriad of communities who aren't diverse at all, who sit back and have to process what they're seeing, have to process the idea that, you know, there's a verifiable concern with the way Black travelers feel about their safety and feeling welcome, and this other opposite metric of $129 billion that for anybody who's, you know, smart can see the huge opportunity gap there that exists. This is research that was very important, very needed. I think that applies at every level. It's just the beginning. It's not comprehensive. The Black traveler space, the Black traveler is not a monolith. We know that. There's a lot to be yet to be learned and dug into, but I think it's an absolute great step in starting to. And I think we talked about this, Jason, about, you know, for the longest time, we were trying to appeal to people's, you know, consciousness by saying, oh, this is important, this is how we feel. But until you have this report that, again, really puts up this side-by-side contrast and comparison about what we're seeing and hearing and what the value is, I think it's a pivotal time in our industry to have to listen to this and process it. So I think it's been a great undertaking.
Ursula?
Yeah, I would just build on what, you know, Danny has said. I mean, you know, for far too long, I mean, I've been in, you know, sales and marketing for the past 20 years, in the travel space for the last decade. And, you know, it has been exhausting with some of the conversations, because, you know, you're saying, let's do X, you know, I know it's going to benefit you, but you get so much pushback. And so finally, you know, we're able to have data that allows us to move beyond just making, you know, the emotional argument and saying, look, you know, Black travelers from the US spend, you know, over, you know, 126 billion, you know, US dollars. And oh, by the way, there are these other markets that, you know, you have, you know, the opportunity to market to as well. It's like, you know, why are you leaving money on the table? You know, demographics are shifting, you know, within the US, you know, as well as, you know, globally. So if for no other reason, come to the table because, you know, you want to see the local businesses, you want to see your city do well, you want to see your state do well, and having data, you know, on a global level that backs this up is very, you know, empowering. So it makes the conversations easier. You know, they're still exhausting, but they are easier. And so that is what has me fired up, is we're taking a very data-driven, you know, approach. It's why when we launched, you know, the Black Travel Alliance last June, you know, we announced, and at the same time, we also did a Pull Up for Travel campaign. because we know data is the foundation of any good, business decision. So we said, okay, you say you want to be an ally, so please tell us, how many staff, you have that are Black. Let's talk about your press and, your media trips. Let's talk about your conferences, your charity contributions, the gamut. Because it's like, if you want to be a true ally, you really have to have people at the table, and across, the board. Marketing gets the brunt of it, but, in HR, IT, vendor selection, across the board, diversity and inclusion needs to be addressed. And so having the data to make the economic argument is quite empowering.
Steve.
Yeah, it's interesting. There were so many surprises in this study, and yet they were surprises that probably shouldn't have been surprises. And so the same things that sort of I found discouraging and saddening out of the study are the same things that give me hope and passion for the future. To see that
what surprised you most?
Yeah, to see that 12 states capture 2/3 of all Black travel is shocking to me. And that represents huge opportunity for other states. And in terms of digging in and understanding why they're not capturing more of those travelers, the lack of hospitality that we work in the hospitality industry, and yet to hear Black travelers say that so often the experiences they have are inhospitable is a really a rude awakening, and something that we need to deal with. And so I think to Ursula's point, to have the data to sort of point to that arms organizations like Cincinnati USA to sort of work with the community. And in their case, I think they're doing a great job, but for destinations like them that aren't doing as well, to be able to say, these are things we need to address, and these are the reasons why. It's almost a little bit of, we can only go up from here. There's just so much opportunity, and a lot of it stems from what Danny mentioned earlier, training. And that starts within the hospitality community. But the reality is that when we're travelers, we don't only engage with people who are in the hospitality community. We engage with citizens when we hop on the bus or hop onto the train. And so we've got to start with where we can, which is, I think, within the hospitality industry. But there's so much more that our communities can and need to be doing to sort of be welcoming places. And I think the last piece that sort of gave me hope is you noticed a really clear distinction between the attitudes of Black travelers in the US, Canada, and the UK from those in France and Germany. And I think in some ways this study almost gives, makes me think of those as countries that perhaps there's opportunities to aspire a little bit in terms of why are there these differences in how Black travelers in those countries weight some of the things that were weighted within the study, and are there cultural aspects that have made for a different landscape there, and how can we learn from and apply some of those things within countries that don't have as welcoming sort of an experience for Black travelers?
Jason.
So, let me make sure I'm answering your question. Repeat the question, because I have a lot of thoughts in my mind right now. And I want to make sure I answer, then I can go off on what it is I wanted to say. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. So the research that Danny presented, how is that fueling the passion that you have?
So the passion I have, again, understanding context is, I believe, again, that tourism empowers communities. And I believe that we are a microcosm of the rest of the world. So the way that we see things is a reflection of the way the world is from where we come from. So the passion for me is, to Ursula's point, is when you have the actual data and you're no longer having to make the emotional argument. Many of us are the only people in the room who have pigmentation in their skin or melanin in their skin. So to just talk about it, and for people whom don't look like us, to just try to get them to understand it is difficult, because they come from different perspectives. And maybe their heart is not turned towards accepting the realities of what the new demographics are stating. So you oftentimes have to give them data for them to make a decision and give them time to reflect and understand. Additionally, some folks may take this data as a threat, because what it's saying is It's disrupting their style of how they were taught, what they believe to be correct, and what they have seen throughout their experiences. So it's difficult to give up power. And oftentimes when data is presented, you have to make a conscious decision on whether or not you're going to accept the facts or choose to go with your insecurities, and recess back to having control versus being productive. And I think that is what we're finding in many of our cities, many of our hotels, attractions, and with many convention bureaus. And so the passion for me is to disrupt that with data, disrupt that with purpose, disrupt that with a sense of, listen, it is not a threat to take away something from you, but is actually expanding your table if the mission of the bureaus, the mission of the hotels and the attractions is to, one, create an experience where people are coming to give revenue, and we're economic developers. We want all of the money to come so it can have a ripple effect throughout the rest of the region, which then creates jobs, helps with the tax base, and positions us as a destination for corporations to move. It helps retain employment and support innovation. So in my mind, people whom are choosing to recess and maintain power, but yet don't want to widen the table to encourage productivity and innovation, are frankly detriments to the growth of our region, and they are frankly eliminating the ability for folks to be passionate. So this data allows us to do that. We're standing on common ground. Here's the facts and the data. Now you can choose to recess or you can move forward. It's really up to you. But the data is the data, and nothing can change from that.
And this is for all of you. I want to start with Jason, then go to Danny, Ursula, and finally Steve. But the area I moved back home, Cincinnati's my home, moved back from, I moved from the most diverse city in the country. And coming back here, you notice the difference. But for people that are in the hospitality industry that may look around and say, listen, my area lacks diversity, why would it be such a priority for me if I'm doing okay and I'm looking at at an area that's not as diverse? Why do I need to change?
Well, I don't think it's a change. I think it is the ability to accept that although your neighborhood may be the same, the rest of the city is not. So what it does is forces you to go out of your circle and to frankly widen your scope of who you engage with, and to challenge you. Are you really involving yourself and engaging in the fabric of a society, or are you choosing to limit yourself to what you know, which makes you feel secure and feel controlled environment? And so that person has to make a decision. Do they really want to really be their best selves and to grow and immerse themselves in a culture that frankly is moving past them? Or would they like to be on an island while everyone else around them is swimming and enjoying themselves?
Danny.
Yeah, I look at my home state of California. Latinx is now the majority here in terms of, you look at the population, you look at the majority, and the largest ethnic group in the state are Latinx people. And I think the demographic change that Jason alluded to earlier is happening, whether, if you are in a small town or a community that's not yet feeling the effects of that, just know that the larger society, the larger culture, and the economy is working in a way that brands not only, and sometimes it's funny because that in my work, I'm also co-chair of our DEI council at the agency. I looked elsewhere for inspiration about how we navigate these topics. I looked at insurance companies, I looked at utility companies, I looked at companies who don't get to choose who their clients are, right? Because that for me told me, travel sometimes is seen as this privilege that we have. But if you're an insurance company or a gas company, you have to cater to everybody. And they're 20, 30 years probably ahead of where we are of having these conversations, because it's imperative to them, to their business, to their bottom line, to their growth, to the survival, that they are inclusive in the way they operate. Because, what else is there? In a country where we have such changing demographics, it's going to be an imperative. So this is above and beyond, as much as we hate to see some of the comments being made or the way that communities are disparaged. These are conversations that are going to yield and facilitate doing the right thing for business, doing the right thing for community, for the industry at large. So Yeah, I don't know what else to say without carrying on. So I'll toss it back to you.
Okay, Ursula.
Well, I think it goes to the core of why we travel. Fundamentally, travelers want to experience new places, new cultures. And so, if your city wants to increase market share, whatever the cultural makeup of your city state, it's imperative that you showcase that. So, obviously, if you've got Black culture, great, put that front and center, but if it's Asian, brown, whatever it is, bring that to forth. Because, when I travel, I want to experience something new. I don't want to go to, Cincinnati, New York, London, Tokyo, and experience the same thing. I want different experiences. That's why I'm investing, the money to come to each destination, because I want something authentic. And if each city is copying what the other is doing, and the authentic experiences that come forth through the local businesses aren't brought forth, you're not gonna achieve what you really want to achieve. So from that standpoint, it makes economic sense to put culture and your people to the front of your tourism product.
Hey Larry, can I comment real quick on that?
Wait, go ahead.
You drop a dime. So Ursula, you said something about us not cities not being the same. I just wanted to say that I've said this in previous webinars, Danny and Ursula and Steve. It's ability to compete, and we're not competing amongst ourselves. We're competing against other destinations, right? So it's okay to be first. It's okay to have innovation. It's okay to be the one that tries and tries new things. And I think oftentimes we, as an industry, we go off what everybody else is doing and not standing alone. We have an insecurity problem. So it's okay to lead. And in fact, people are attracted to leaders, not the folks who follow. So just keep that as we're talking about competitions, we're talking innovation, and we're talking about doing new things and leading the conversation, not following all the time. I think we'll find ways or pathways to be successful. And I keep harking on that throughout various webinars that it's okay to be competitive. It's okay to lead the conversation with data. It's okay to be first. I'm sorry, Steve. I'm gonna get in front of you, man. It's a ball head thing. We good, bro. We good.
Blame me, Steve, but I really want to hear your thoughts here.
I was gonna say, I will always cede the floor to a better looking bald man. So all good. It's funny. We've talked a lot about the economics of the Black traveler and why communities do this. But I think there's actually an underlying piece of those of us who work in the travel and tourism, why we're in the industry. And part of that is that there's pride in the destinations we promote, the destinations we come from. And so whether or not my community has a diverse population of its own, and I've heard from some destinations that don't actually, they're 80% white, 90% white. We still want to tell that story to as many people as possible. And I think part of being in this industry, being in the travel industry, being in the hospitality industry is to share our community with others and to share our stories as broadly and widely as we can. And I think that's an underlying reason of why it's important for us, with whatever community we're in, to be thinking about all of the audiences that can benefit from that story we have to tell. And that allows us to extend that pride to, again, a wider audience. And at its core, working in the hospitality industry, it's about making visitors and guests feel comfortable, making them feel safe, making them feel welcomed. And that aligns completely whether we're talking about, a majority population visitor or a minority population visitor. And we need to be giving the same sort of attention and focus to both groups.
This is for Ursula, and I really for all of you. I want to start with Ursula, then come back to you, Steve, Danny, and Jason, since you got to go twice already. But I wonder, people seeing Danny's presentation, what you think is most actionable? I hate to say the lowest hanging fruit, but the thing that people can take away and do something about right away.
Well, I'd say the first thing is to do an internal review, to because you need to understand where you are, in terms of, product development, your staffing. And, once you have an understanding, okay, this is where we are, then we can look to get, outside help to, develop things to, attract more, Black travelers, as well as other brown, travelers as well. So it's like, you have to do the internal, review along with, look at the data, and then once you put a plan together, I mean, it is so key that your marketing to Black travelers and brown travelers is not just, contained in 1 month, i.e. for Black people, it's not just Black History Month. So it needs to be a 12-month plan because not all of us are traveling in February. $126 billion is spent throughout the year. So have a plan that goes across 12 months, use your Black content creators. Of course, I'm gonna say that, but it's take it step by step and, address the safety issue. So, safety is, crime, but it's also, what, hotels, destinations are doing, themselves. So, right now, you have, hotels talking about, how clean their hotels are. Well, the same business can talk about, okay, we've done training of our frontline staff. So talk about those things, because those are not normal things that, we would have thought of, before to add to our marketing message. But if you're going to talk about, the cleanliness of your rooms and what your staff is doing at the same time, you can talk about, some of the things that you're doing to make Black travelers, welcome. So, you don't necessarily have to spend more money. You just need to talk about some of the things that you're already doing. Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah, so I mean, I actually agree with Ursula. I mean, I hate to say it's sort of like what she said, because it is really starting with that analysis of what are we doing well, where are the areas for improvement, and how do we make this a conscious, ongoing effort? I think the other piece that I've certainly been talking about lately is measurement. What does success look like? If that which gets measured gets attention, and so I think it's important, as we're thinking about our destination, our businesses, what does success look like, and how do we measure whether we're moving towards that, whether we're making headway towards achieving that success as we define it? And like all good sort of efforts, that should be a moving goal, right? I mean, once we get to what success we thought success looked like, what's the next place? How do we stretch a little further? But I think that measurement piece is critical because that's how we make sure that we're prioritizing things and evaluating whether what we're doing is working or not working.
Danny.
I would say a lot of us assume that these conversations are being had with the ease that we're having them today, and there's a lot of places in this country where that's not the case still. I think it's pushing for change. I think it's making space in organizations for people of color who haven't traditionally been at the table. I think it's going out to marginalized communities, looking within, yes, everything Ursula said and Steve said, but also creating more inclusion, admitting that in the past, maybe things weren't done most inclusively or with equity in mind, and that's okay. Admitting that you're not going to be able to make up for what was not done. But I think beginning from scratch and level setting and pushing leadership, pushing boards, pushing investors, pushing owners to understand that this has to be a priority and why is step number one. Because without any of that buy-in and without any of that inclusiveness, the attempts won't be successful. And I think somebody asked the question about how do we start? You listen, you create space, and you include people who haven't been at the table before. And I think that's some of the best things we can do to ensure that things actually do stick.
Jason.
I would say continue to be bold and unafraid to stand on the data. And what I mean by that is, and many times the diversity offices or departments are working, but the insecurity of others may peep in, and then the actions to dilute the concentration of influence may happen, and then the leadership is in it kind of in the middle of a fight, of an internal fight. Do we support it? Is it too much? Is it too much attention, or do we back off of it to help other people come along because they're not there yet? So in my mind, as I speak to different CVBs and different organizations, I would encourage the leadership to continue to be bold, invest into your diversity spaces. If you're going to have a diversity person or department, make sure they're fully resourced, they're empowered, they have equitable say within the executive discussions. They're leaders and are very clear objectives and supported by the board, staff, and overly communicated to the community in which they serve. And I believe that data helps people make that decision. And again, data can only move people's brains, but their hearts is actually the ones that are going to pumps the feelings. And if we can present all the data we want, but at the end of the day, if person's hearts are cold and not accepting the truth, then really there's really not a lot we can do other than apply pressure with more data and more support, more education like we have here, and to keep pushing the conversation as to why it's important. And eventually that person will see it or they won't. And then that's the community's responsibility then to take action or not to, and then kind of move from there to decide if they want to be competitive or not.
Thank you, Jason, and all of the panelists. We have a great question actually in the chat that I'm going to start with Steve and have you guys go around and answer. We'll go from Steve to Danny to Ursula and back to Jason. Jay wrote in the chat box, how do you deal with the anonymous complainers that might notice these initiatives and try to derail the work? And how do you prepare your leaders for this? Excellent questions.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that it is about not going it alone. I think that, and Danny may have suggested this even, it is about building up sort of a team that approaches this. And the stronger that team is, the more that team includes not just organizations within the community, but individuals, those who maybe aren't even affiliated with specific organizations in that process. I think the harder it is to derail. It speaks to the buy-in that you have that is broader than your own organization. And I think it arms you against those attempts.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we need white allies. So, people, white people who are in leadership roles, who will publicly champion, what we're advocating for. So it's not just, Black and brown people saying we need X, we need to see Y, but, we have people who are part of the establishment, so to speak, who are saying, yes, this is necessary, this is needed. And if it's a group effort where, you have, Blacks, Asians, Latinos, white people who are all saying, yep, we need to move forward, change is coming, change must happen, then it's much harder to knock it back.
Danny.
The research, I'm going to go back to the research. So a solid approach and a defensible one is to say, as travel and tourism and hospitality organizations in charge for the economic vitality of Cincinnati, this is an imperative based on the opportunity and based on the opportunities we see. And the Cincinnati's already great position. You look at the meeting planner study, you look at how Cincinnati's already ranking. That's more than most can say. And I think that to leave that behind would be a mistake. To keep pushing in this area is going to be the right approach, and that's defensible, and that's certainly from a strategic standpoint something that would be hard to challenge.
Jason.
Again, to Danny's point, the data. Additionally, I would show that person that the industry as a whole, to Danny's point, is moving to a more inclusive and more representative effect of the global economy. I co-chair a committee from the Events Industry Council, which is a global organization that is focused on all the umbrella convention groups that we go after as an industry, and some of us do content work for. And one of the models that we're creating is exactly the work that we do here in Cincinnati, or we did do it before COVID, is a dedicated model that speaks to the consumers, Black or brown, access challenge, et cetera, that make sure people feel included, that we're speaking to them directly, and we're having a bold and accelerated conversation. Because a lot of times folks talk about diversity, but it's very slow. We have to wait and see, and I don't know, people aren't ready, they're not comfortable. So what? It's 2021. We have the data, the demographics aren't changing, aren't waiting, they're changing. We have to move forward. And if we want to compete, again, we have to make those decisions, and you have to show whoever your leader is, here is the universe around us. Here's where we're currently at. The only way we're going to be competitive is we go in the direction of where the consumers are and what it makes sense for the global economy.
Great. There are a couple of comments, questions here in the chat box. I want to reiterate those and try to get your thoughts about this. Jackie wrote, just so no one can say they really don't understand what we mean by Black traveler safety, will you please be more specific about the questions we ask internally when deciding whether to travel to a destination? Can you tell them how much time we spend looking at websites and pictures? Tell them we look at what the leadership of the communities look like. Explain that we watch the quote unquote diverse videos to see if they just drop some video of random folks from the 1970s in there. Jason, I'll get your thoughts on that.
So, hey, Jackie. So what Jackie is saying is essentially, is our strategy authentic? Or to her point, are we just putting cut and paste and copying stock photos into an actual article? Or are we using buzzwords during these press releases? If I go on your website and I see there's no people of color on your board, but you have a diversity initiative, are you really being serious about it? Or are you just talking about it? Other things she's talking about as well is, am I going to have issues if I pull up your city? Will there be discrimination? Will there be words that are not very attractive to me? Will there be police issues? Are the websites catering to my particular needs and speaking to the needs of the people who I represent? And so, is there an authentic, fully comprehensive strategy? Not just some surface stuff, but a fully comprehensive that has depth, that people can really see themselves in, and people thought through it, not just responding with a knee-jerk reaction because you've been called out. So I think that's really what she's getting to, and I think there is best practices that can solve for that, and I believe that there's some cities that are doing it right, and Cincinnati pre-COVID again had that concentration. And we're working through how we deliver that now moving forward.
Carol wrote in the chat box, as a Black travel content creator in Cincinnati, I find that it can be a challenge to promote Black travel locally on one's own. How important is it for the hospitality community and content creators to work together to promote Black travel? Who wants to tackle that?
I'll take that, being the content creator on the panel. I would say that is the big reason, the major reason why we formed the Black Travel Alliance. So we have two main goals: is to form the alliance to amplify each other's voices, because if we're together, we are stronger. And that is essentially what happened. I mean, most people are really surprised that we launched in 2020, June, and we are where we are. And that is literally because the 18 of us on the board, we leveraged our combined social media channels and our network, within the media to, create this organization. And from the 18 members, I mean, we now have about 400, content creators, across the globe. Most are in the US, but like myself, I'm here in London. So we're all over, and we are unifying so that we can make the case to up-level skills, do group trips. One of the things that we have coming up, because we hear time and time from destinations as well as travel brands, oh, I can't find Black content creators. Well, we're here. We're actually having an event on May 22nd, which is a Saturday, but it's called Wavelength, and it is, essentially a matchmaking service. So, travel brands, DMOs will have the opportunities to meet with, Black, travel content creators from, across the globe. I mean, this is an event that we did in December. We had about 30 brands and over 100, content creators and, hundreds of meetings. So yes, to her point, we definitely have to work together and make the case, because we want to progress as business owners, as well as help the destinations find us. We're out here, but for some reason they say they can't. So that's one of the main reasons why the Black Travel Alliance was formed. So if you're not already a member, please sign up. It's also one of the reasons why we advocated for some of the funding from the scholarship grants. Some of that will go to the content creators because we are, essential in telling the story of all the destinations, that are out there, whether they have a Black, population or not, because, when I go to a city, yes, I'm interested in the Black culture, but I'm just interested in culture. So, if it's, Italians, Irish, Germans, whatever the underlining culture in that city, I want to learn about it. I am not alone. This is huge for Black travelers. So when we say culture, don't just think it means Black culture. It means culture, period.
Thank you so much for that. There are two more questions in the chat box. Unfortunately, we are out of time and we're going to need to wrap here. I'm going to bring Julie Calvert back in. But before Julie steps in, I do want to thank all of you who joined us for this fantastic discussion. I'm enlightened, I'm inspired, and I'm not even in hospitality, but I'm a journalist and I look forward to covering stories that sort of promote this city. I certainly look forward to that and partnering with those of you in town to do so. But to Ursula, to Danny, to Steve, to Jason, thank you so much. Julie, take us away.
Great. Thank you, Larry. A great job today in moderating this panel. Such powerful information that we heard today from not only where we are as an industry, where we stand today, but the opportunity of where we can be moving forward. So I think that there's a lot of information here that we can all start to use. A lot of us are using it already. As we formulate our marketing strategies, our sales strategies, and importantly, our engagement strategies moving forward as a hospitality industry. And certainly from the Cincinnati USA CVB standpoint, we look forward to being a leader, a continued leader in that space as well. So I too want to thank the panel. Great job, courageous conversations. Your work that you're doing in the industry is transforming the industry. To use Jason's words, it's disrupting the industry. And I think that's all for the better. The question becomes, how do we make that across the board? Not just happening in one organization or one venue or whatever, but how do we make that the standard bearer for the way that we market this region? Because again, we listen to our panelists today, they're not just looking at one institution, one organization, they're looking at the region as a whole. And what does that service delivery look like? What does that experience look like? And the more we can be, and I love using this word, and Jason has really taught me the true meaning of it, is intentional and authentic in that way. So under Jason's leadership at the CVB and the rest of our senior team and our whole team and our board, we look forward to really expanding upon that opportunity. Again, to Ursula, Patula, Barzi, thank you very much. Jason Dunn, thank you very much. Steve Paganelli, thank you very much. It's great to see you. Danny Guerrero, thank you very much. And the work that we're going to do with you to really capture that essence of what that traveler is coming from into Cincinnati is really going to be important for our future work, along with the folks at Meet NKY. And finally, Larry Seward, welcome back home. Good to see you here in Cincinnati. Thanks for all your hard and your passionate work and for leading such an insightful and thoughtful discussion for us today. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you on the next Be Empowered Vibe Cincinnati Speaker Series. And I know Jason has quite a few very robust ones planned for the rest of the year. So thank you, everyone. Be empowered and have a great rest of your week.